Hi everybody, Michael here. Today's video, I've come up with a sensible remigration plan with the grace of God. Let's go. Okay, so because I've recently criticised Steve Laws and his extremism, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, you're just going to let us be replaced and you don't want to do anything. But what I'm advocating for is we have a remigration plan, but backed by the grace of God, not by evil. So we don't need to persecute good migrants and deport every single foreigner. That's just extremism and stupidity, especially with all the National Socialist sympathy and banging on about the Jews that these certain people go on about. We need to listen to sensible, wise people. And the problem is, a sensible plan is not going to come in if we have these whack jobs as the face of remigration, because when your average person listens to it and they're going on about deporting every single foreigner, even mixed race people, and then banging on about the Jews, that's going to discredit the movement for remigration. And it's very important that sensible, wise people, such as Peter North, such as myself, advocating for ways to do this that the general public are going to get behind and say, well, that's a sensible, reasonable conclusion. And basically, this plan that I have 6 points coming up, this is the plan to get England to be 90-95% demographic again in, say, 30 years' time. And whilst they've demographically replaced us over 30, 40, 50 years, we basically just reverse that process over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And initially, it could be done quickly, and then with time, it would just slowly work out in our favour without the need for persecuting good migrants who are assimilated here. And the structure of this video, there's 6 points of my remigration plan. I basically had the video ready to go on Saturday, and I asked ChatGPT just to put the 6 points in a thumbnail, and it actually came up with a more detailed plan. So I thought, that's pretty good. Let me do a video explaining each point in slightly more detail. So let's get into it now. Okay, so the first thing we would do is stop all illegal immigration into the country and shut the borders. So we had established full control of the borders, prevent illegal entry, and we would prioritise the deportation of all individuals involved in crime and terrorism. Now, that's obviously standard thing you're going to do to protect the country. Get rid of all the illegals and stop the migration coming into the country. Okay, the second point would be removing all welfare for migrants, and we would end access to non-essential state benefits for non-citizens and recent migrants, and introduce voluntary repatriation schemes for legal migrants who wish to return to their countries of origin, supported by transitional assistance where appropriate. So just like when I do a parasite cleanse, once a year for my body, what I do is I'll do a fast and take some herbs to remove the parasites. Because once you stop feeding parasites, they will leave your system. And the same with us. Once we stop giving all these migrants benefits, they'll leave the country, and it will also stop the incentives for them to come here. Because most people who come on the boats, all these people are coming for economic reasons. So once you remove the incentives, they'll stop coming and they'll also leave. So that's a simple way you'll remove millions just by removing incentives. And I've heard something like there's almost 1 million foreigners on social housing, when that money could be used for young British couples to have more children. Okay, and the third point is I would basically ban Islam and encourage Muslims who want to practice Islam to leave. And that's the main point of number 3. And ChatGPT have basically said that cultural compatibility and integration. So we promote migration policies that prioritise cultural compatibility, social cohesion, and shared civic values. Encourage voluntary relocation options for migrants who feel more aligned with societies that share their cultural or religious norms without coercion. So obviously I was talking mainly about Islam, but also any foreigners who are not pro-English and they go on about communism and all this stuff, and they're saying how wonderful their countries are, like all these Pakistanis and Bangladeshis on the streets celebrating their countries. Well, we encourage them and tell them to go home. And the people who we want here are the ones who are integrated and who love and respect our country. Okay, point 4 is I would temporarily completely shut the borders and stop mostly all migration into the country, because we need to stop the flow that's coming in. Because at this moment, with the amount coming in and the amount of babies they're having, it's inevitable that we'll be replaced. But one way to stop that is, again, with the parasite analogy. Once you stop them coming in, it'll be impossible for us to be replaced, especially when we put the other measures in place. And ChatGPT says controlled and selective immigration. So we temporarily close the borders. I would have it not just temporary, but maybe for 5 or 10 years for pretty much all migration. But also selective immigration when necessary. So we would only allow migration in clearly defined exceptional cases where there is a demonstrable national benefit. For example, critical skills shortages, strategic expertise, and humanitarian cases. So you may want to help, say, Ukrainian migrants who are fleeing war temporarily and they're culturally compatible. Or if we need some dentists and India can send us 100, 200 dentists, then we would take them in as long as they're in very, very small numbers. And obviously the goal would be to train up British people to do these jobs anyway. But in the short term, you have to make allowances, and to take in a certain amount of people from other countries is just a natural, sensible thing that you would do. Okay, and number 5 is protecting the long-term demographic stability of the nation. And as it says here, support policies that encourage family formation among citizens, particularly young couples. And that would be done by stop giving social housing to all these migrants and give them to young English families and encourage them to have children. Provide incentives such as tax relief, housing support, childcare assistance to promote stable family growth, what I just said, and aim to gradually restore the historic national demographic balance over time through lawful, non-coercive measures. So again, it doesn't need to be anything gradual or extreme. You just need to gradually restore our demographic superiority in this country. Okay, and point number 6 is about doing it with heart and not resorting and falling to do it for evil, such as the Steve Laws method. And I know some people like to say he's just moving the Overton window, but he is a Nazi sympathiser, and I've seen some absolutely insane takes that a lot of other people have been saying, more extreme than Steve Laws. And essentially what this will be, number 6, is a peaceful and lawful implementation without any hate. So it would ensure all demographic and immigration changes occur gradually and naturally. Reject persecution, collective punishment, or extreme measures against law-abiding migrants, and emphasise fairness, legality, and respect for individual rights throughout the process. So let's just take Pakistan for an example. We've seen Afghanistan, the UAE, get rid of a load of Pakistanis. And let's be honest, we've had a lot of problem with Pakistani demographic in this country, with the grooming gangs, with terrorism. But we also have to accept there are some good Pakistanis, such as Raja Mir, I think his name is, and Lubna Candid, she calls her YouTube channel, who have done a lot of good for England. They've assimilated, they love and respect England, and they've spoken out against the grooming gangs. They've even put themselves at persecution from their own community. So we can look at it and say, well, all of these communities who've gone along with the grooming gangs, anybody who's even protected them will be deported to Pakistan, no problem. Anybody who promotes terrorism, who promotes the implementation of Sharia law in our country, they can all go ruthlessly. But the good ones, like Lubna, like Ben Habib, who's English anyway, because he has English blood and an English mother, but all of them, there's no reason for them to go or be removed from our country. Just the same as with anybody from any other nation or demographic who feel like England is their home and they love and respect England, they can stay. But I would get rid of all subversive people. So whether they're subversive Jewish people, subversive Pakistanis, subversive black Africans who disrespect the British, they can go. But all people who love and respect England, they will obviously stay. And the goal will be to slowly turn England back to the 90-95% supermajority with time. And we also have to accept that a lot of these small amounts of foreign people who have married into our tribe and had children, so such as mixed race children, I consider them English, and their children would be raised naturally to love England because they are, by blood, they are English. And I think people, whilst we need to understand we are a white English country, we also understand that going forward, things aren't always going to be exactly the same as they have been in the past. Because as I said, myself, I know English people who've had got married to foreign women, such as Indian, Jamaican, and Japanese, and their children are mixed race. But I would consider them English, and we are going to have to realize that there is going to be a small amount of mixed race people in this country. And we will love and support them. But we also have to acknowledge that we are a majority white English country, and we should try and protect that demographic. And one way you would do that would be by stopping migration completely and slowly allowing the native English to repopulate to be a supermajority again. And it's backed by the love of our own, not the hatred of others. We're not doing this to persecute and hate foreign or other people. We're doing this out of a love of our own and to protect and preserve the native English people. Especially when we know that if we become a minority, so say Islam, for example, the white English will, or the future white English will suffer persecution. And we also know that demographically, if the white English are replaced and we allow these extremist race communists to take over, who believe that whites are evil and all that stuff, then again, in the future, young white people will suffer due to this race-based communism. So whether it's the Islamic takeover or the race-based communist takeover, the young white English people will be targeted and will suffer. So that's why we have to do it. It's not about hatred, it's about love and protecting our own. Okay, and one thing I want to add to this video is the spiritual perspective on migration and is it moral, is it immoral? And a lot of people are ignorant and they have the spiritual perspective that you must be spiritual and loving and open borders and Jesus was a refugee and all that nonsense. But you also get Christians who say that they don't care if we're an all African country as long as they're all Christian. You know, both of those narratives are false. And I myself are a spiritual expert. I've been doing this for 15, 20 years, so I have good discernment from God. And I've also studied and follow all of the great spiritual masters through history. I'm just going to provide you quickly with a few examples of why being spiritually in the power of the Logos is about being loyal to your tribe. Okay, so first we have Jesus, the most obvious example. Jesus was actually a very proud Jew. In many parts of the Bible, it says, I only come for the house of Israel, for my fellow Jews. And obviously, all throughout the Old Testament, it talks about protecting your tribe. So in Christian and Jewish terms, it's important to protect your own tribe. Okay, and then secondly, recently you had the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama said that at some point, this migration must stop and Europe belongs to the Europeans. So that's in Buddhist theology. And then even Myanmar, they had Islamic invasion, and the Buddhists, they had similar problems that we had with the Muslims, and the Myanmar Buddhists kicked them out. They didn't think about compassion and all that stuff in terms of they understood that they're being manipulated, and compassion for the Muslims pushing evil in their country was discompassion for their own. And another spiritual master is one called Yogananda, who's an Indian spiritual master who lived in America during World War II times. And he was actually warning then about the fact that Americans need to be patriotic, because he could see a sort of communist Marxist agenda back then. And he said it's very important that Americans don't allow these subversive people to take over their country. And it's important that Americans be patriotic. So, you know, this is a great spiritual master. And he wasn't telling the Americans, oh, don't worry, man, it's all about spirituality and allow all this Marxist communism stuff. No, all the great wise spiritual masters know that you must protect your tribe. And he, as an Indian, said he loved and respected Americans for letting him live in their great country, and that they must protect the American culture and people. He wasn't being subversive, saying, yeah, take in another 10 million Indians. And a more recent example, a modern spiritual figure I like in modern times is someone called Sadhguru. And he has a lot of liberal people who think they're spiritual who go to his talks. And a lot of them were surprised when he said in one of his talks, you know, Indians need to be proud of being Indian and patriotic. And that is not spiritual to be unpatriotic. And one of his students said to him, how can I support you when you're essentially a racist? And he came up with a very profound reply saying, you've just basically been brainwashed by this Marxist subversion, and that you should be patriotic to your own people. So I want to clarify that it's not unspiritual and hateful to be against open borders. You know, it's in many ways, it's treachery and betrayal of your people and God when you do not stand up for your own tribe with the love of God. And this is what all the spiritual masters and Jesus himself made perfectly clear, that you mustn't hate others. It's just about a love of your own. Jesus didn't hate other people. He loved his Jewish brothers, but he also taught us not to hate people from your other tribe, you know, and the Good Samaritan, all that stuff. Okay, so that's my remigration plan. And I think that's a plan that pretty much most people will get behind. You're going to have the extremists on who, you know, the Nazi defenders who are not going to like it because, oh, no, you're not extreme enough. And then you're going to get the open borders people who'll be like, oh, that's a bit racist. But I think this is a plan that most people will get behind it. Even migrants will look at it and say, well, I can't complain. That's a fair plan. And I think it's important that this sort of remigration plan is pushed rather than some of the extremists out there. Because when you have extremists talking about we need to deport every single foreigner, even mixed race people, and then they start going on about the Jews of controlling everything, and Hitler was wonderful, he was right. People are immediately going to be turned off of the idea of a remigration plan. And the media and the corrupt elite will use their extremism against us. And I have found that in nationalist circles, it seems like most of them are whack jobs, and they always go on about the Jews and Israel. And it seems that if you don't hate them and push that agenda, then you will not be welcomed in their circles. So I think we just need to step over them, ignore them, and don't have any association with them. Just get the mass 95% of people who are not extremists to follow a sensible migration plan, such as what I am pushing and what Peter North and many other Rupert Lowe type, I assume Ben Habib, they would push this sort of plan. And people need to get behind something like this that people will agree with, not extremism. We don't need to fall for it. And don't get into all this, don't counter signal him because we need to act now. What they're doing, they're purity spiraling. And what they're secretly doing is pushing their ideology, which is National Socialism. And they're using our migration crisis to push their agenda, even though they do have admittable grievances with the system. They have been captured by a dangerous ideology. And we cannot overcome evil with evil. We can only overcome evil with good. And this remigration plan is a remigration plan with the grace and wisdom of God, not with blind evil and ignorance of the dark one. Okay? So that's the point of my video today. Please like it and share it with as many people as you can to get this sensible plan out there. If you're new, please subscribe to the channel, because in this coming year, we're going to be moving forward a lot in getting this wisdom out into the country and sorting our problems with the power of the Logos and the grace of God. God bless everybody today. Goodbye.